Imagine a world before players, where cave people fought with stone swords and evolved over thousands of years to invent every weapon in the game. By piecing together clues in the game and researching lore, we can uncover the true history of Minecraft War. It all began long ago, thousands of years before the first players spawned in. The newly evolved villagers were armed only with their fists. They relied on punching their prey and eating raw meat to survive. Early villagers lived nomadically, following the herds of cows and pigs across the lands. Occasionally, these wandering tribes would run into each other as they both hunted the same prey. Lacking a shared language, they would rely on grunts and yells to intimidate the other. When this attempt at intimidation would fail, the two tribes would come to blows. While these fights would lead to some casualties, fossil records indicate that most of the defeated tribesmen would leave these encounters with only scratches and bruised egos. Over generations, the villager fist became stronger and tougher. This was how villagers gained the ability to dig dirt and break trees barehanded. Using this newfound strength, they were able to use wood to create the first campfires. It didn't take long for them to figure out how to cook their meat over the warm fire. Not only did the meat taste better, it was also more nourishing, allowing them to satisfy their hunger with less food and recover from injuries faster. They used sticks from trees as the first weapons, broke logs down into planks, and created the first crafting tables. This new discovery led to the early villagers having many more ideas for how to use the resources around them. They found that combining their sticks with planks made them sharper and deadlier, thus creating the first wooden swords. A few years later, they invented the wooden pickaxe, enabling them to collect stone, which they crafted into even sharper swords. Using these new tools, the tribes were able to defeat prey much faster and defend themselves from other tribes along with the various dangers of the night. Being able to defeat spiders gave villagers the ability to collect and use string. When combined with sticks, this new resource enabled villagers to craft the first bows. Flint arrowheads and chicken feathers yielded arrows, giving villagers the ability to hunt their prey from a distance. Today's players can sometimes find these arrowheads buried in piles of gravel, though they've lost their sharpened shape over time. The invention of the bow and arrow gave early villagers another exciting new ability as well: long-range combat.
Ready, aim, fire!
Not all early inventions were for violence. Stone tools like the shovel and hoe were used to cultivate land to grow crops like wheat, carrots, and potatoes. But the most essential of these stone tools was the pickaxe. Over the next couple centuries, villagers became significantly more advanced. They built villages and temples to keep themselves and their valuables safe, many of which still stand today. No longer did they depend on hunting wild animals for food. The crops from their farms allowed them to domesticate cows, pigs, and chickens.
Hey, you're cute! I'll give you wheat every day if you come live with me.
The surplus of meat and fish also led to the taming of dogs and cats, whose skeletons are often found laying next to ancient villager remains. Their war tactics had shifted from hunting animals and going on the offensive against other tribes to focusing more on defense and protecting their homes. However, these same husbandry advancements were being made in ancient pillager civilizations, which were far more prone to violence. Their supplies of leather enabled warriors to craft the first sets of leather armor, a skill that's been passed down to today's leather workers. With their new armor, attackers could survive volleys of arrows from archers defending their villages and temples. The need to create stronger and more durable weapons drove villagers to mine deeper into the earth. The newly invented furnaces were made to burn coal hot enough to melt iron ore into bars, leading to the creation of iron tools, weapons, and armor. Furnaces also led to stone bricks becoming the main building material for villagers' most important structures.
See, you just stack them like this. They look better than cobble, don't you think?
These building and weaponry advancements made them hungry for conquest, so it was during this time that villages began to grow and absorb their neighbors, forming the first kingdoms. For the first time in villager history, being a soldier became a full-time job. Recruits would be given food and pay in exchange for serving in the king's army. During times of peace, the soldier's main job would be to patrol the trade routes and protect the settlements of the kingdom. When war was declared, soldiers would be sent out to lay siege to the enemy's castles.
For the king!
The crumbling remains of these kingdoms suggest that sieges were a long and brutal undertaking. Most attackers would try to starve out the defenders, but with a good supply of food, weeks passed before they ran out. Attacking the castle directly led to many casualties on the attacking side. Crossbows became the weapon of choice for defenders as they were more powerful and less straining than traditional bows. If soldiers were lucky enough to avoid the arrows and make it to the castle walls, they would begin placing ladders. To stop them from reaching the top, defenders would use iron buckets and pour lava down onto the attackers. If enough of the attacking army was killed, defenders would send out their cavalry to burn down the siege camp. Horses enabled troops to quickly flank around foot soldiers and break through any shield walls they formed.
We're being overrun! Pull back, men! Retreat!
Developing new ways to break through castle walls was the top priority for all the kingdoms across the land. Kings poured tons of their gold into finding the best engineers and scholars. Finally, inventors discovered that the gunpowder dropped by creepers could be packed together with sand to create TNT. Sappers could place TNT at the base of a castle's wall and blow it to smithereens. This new technology also led to an explosion of innovation. Not long after that, the first TNT cannons were built using redstone, delivering the destructive power of TNT from a distance. With this new technology, warfare would be irreversibly changed and a new era would begin. In the centuries following the invention of TNT, the small kingdoms of the world began to conquer one another until a few large civilizations and empires remained. Once the dust had settled, a new era of peace and prosperity began. International relations cooled as vast trade networks and alliances were established. Railways carried large amounts of goods across far distances. Oceans were able to be crossed using compasses and maps. These impressive advancements in trade routes laid the groundwork for today's wandering traders. But not everything was peaceful in this diamond age. As industry boomed, the need to produce massive quantities of goods became a top priority. Many workers were sent underground to create intricate mine shafts. Through years of trial and error, they developed wood supports to stabilize the walls and ceilings of mine shafts. The shape of each mine was optimized to find the most resources possible, and many still stand to this day. However, mine collapses were common, as well as other industrial accidents. Fed up with their treatment and low wages, workers began to protest against these conditions.
Enough is enough! We will not be silenced!
This has to stop. Bring in the muscle.
Owners would use iron golems to break up the protests, but this only made the situation worse. Miners, factory workers, and other disgruntled citizens began to meet in secret and organize rebellions. By stealing buckets of lava and TNT from their warehouses, these rebels began the culture of griefing that players still enjoy today. With production grinding to a halt, factory owners resorted to climbing down into the mines themselves to look for a resource to put a stop to the rebelling workers.
Incredible. This ought to do the trick.
They found what they were looking for in diamonds, the strongest and sharpest material discovered to date. They crafted the material into swords, which were an effective threat that largely forced the working class back in line. To keep the precious stone from falling into the wrong hands, employers used diamond picks to mine obsidian, built vaults with it, and kept their surplus diamonds inside. Try as they might, the workers were unable to create a tool strong enough to break the obsidian. In the process, they made some very crafty inventions, including the enchanting table. With access to plenty of lapis lazuli, the workers were able to enchant their own iron weapons and crossbows in secret.
Whoa! Sweeping edge too? What does that do?
After experimenting and learning about enchantments, the rebellion reunited and put forth one final effort to free themselves from their factories and mines. The enchanted weapons proved very effective, especially the crossbows, which allowed them to attack from outside the range of a deadly diamond sword. Some of these groups of workers were successful and used the diamond pickaxes the factory owners dropped to break open the obsidian vaults. Soon after, they discovered that the dark purple stone had another use. When arranged in the rectangle and lit with flint and steel, they were able to create a shimmering portal. What laid on the other side allowed them to create weapons and tools they'd never dreamed of, launching civilization into the most advanced age it ever reached. Once word had spread about the Nether, Minecraft's ancient civilizations quickly began building portals and sending expeditions into the unknown dimension. Before long, the Nether was populated with those looking to collect the valuable resources scattered throughout the Nether. After defeating a few blazes, it was discovered that the rods they dropped could be crafted into brewing stands. rare materials like netherwort, gas tears, and blade powder became highly sought after to create potions of healing, strength, and regeneration. Netherite could be crafted into even more powerful swords and armor. These pieces of weaponry eventually became buried and can be found today in the form of ancient debris. Though the Nether held many dangers, those who grew rich off of its resources became obsessed with it, even bringing pigs in as a food supply. Large nether fortresses would be constructed, and netherwort farms covered the soul sand plains. But while society enjoyed the new possibilities entering the nether could bring, they never once considered what would come out. Over the years, the nether portals have been corrupting the overworld around them, turning dirt into netherrack and soul sand. Those who spent long periods of time within the nether began to change. They were angrier, more aggressive, and developed an insatiable hunger. They tried to leave through the portal before they got any worse, but it was too late. When they teleported back into the overworld, they found that their flesh had become rotten, their clothes tattered, and they had the uncontrollable urge to eat their own kind. Zombies quickly overran the ancient civilizations, throwing them into ruin. The weapons they had used to dispatch one another were useless against the unending hordes of zombies and skeletons. The few who escaped destroyed their portals and left them scattered all around the map for players to find centuries later. These surviving villagers settled into small villages. Protected by the remaining iron golems, villagers were able to survive in the new world. Witches, who had specialized in creating potions, tried to cure the infected. Others escaped and hid underground, constructing the strongholds found deep within the earth. It is hypothesized that these subterranean villagers perished while trying to develop the unfinished end portals they left behind. These survivors swore they would never bloody their hands again, crossing their arms as a sign of pacifism. Centuries passed, and over time, the old world decayed, reclaimed by nature. The only remnants of the past are the ruins scattered throughout the world. And when it seemed like the world was finally coming to an end, the first players spawned in. The future of Minecraft is still being written, and based on the past, we can hypothesize what future weapons and tools might develop. After exploring the deep dark, players might find themselves able to create new workbenches and furnaces with deep slate. Because the new material is harder than regular stone, it would allow them to smelt iron and coal at even higher temperatures than are possible in today's regular and blast furnaces.
Phew, I gotta crack a window.
This would result in the creation of steel, a new metal never seen before in the Minecraft world. It would be extremely resistant to heat and be incredibly difficult to bend. These qualities would make it perfect for the creation of a new class of weapons that go through greater stress than swords do. Based on players' knowledge of gunpowder, it's likely that steel could be used to invent guns. Players could use them to have intense battles at breakneck speed, no longer having to notch arrows to kill their enemies from a distance. But it wouldn't have to stop there. An entire age of industrialization could begin, bringing mechanized vehicles and heavy artillery with it. Based on the discovery of new chemicals in some versions of the game, it may even be possible for nuclear weapons to be created.
Prepare for detonation!
The possibilities are endless. We could even find ourselves back where we started, in another Stone Age.